Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Goff, and I'm Principal Product Marketing here at Revenera, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Untangling the Software Monetization Stack in a Usage-Based Economy. Usage-based monetization models aren't new, but they are all the rage again. As AI moves closer to our products and how we deliver them, more firms are incorporating usage consumption-based offerings into their product portfolio. In response, business application vendors across a diverse range of categories are modifying their solutions to support them. The result can be a confusing technology landscape, so I am very excited to have Lily Varon, Principal Analyst at Forrester, here with us today to help us make sense of the landscape and the quote-to-cash tech stack. Before we get started, though, let's go over a few housekeeping details. First, today's discussion will be roughly 45 minutes long or so, and if you have questions or comments along the way, please be sure to add them in the Q&A tab, and we'll try to answer them as we go along, or at the end if time allows. If we don't get to your questions, don't worry. We will follow up with you individually after the event. Please also be sure to check out the Docs tab, where we've shared a number of resources that you may be interested in. You definitely don't want to miss those. And finally, we will be sending you a link to the recording in the next 48 hours. So let's get started. Welcome, Lily.
Yay, thanks for having me. So listen, this is a huge topic, and there's so much to go through. I think that there's kind of two big things to talk about. One is what you alluded to there, the transformation of our products and our monetization strategies as we incorporate more artificial intelligence and more advanced artificial intelligence into our products. And the other piece is, what does that do to our stack? What does it do to our technology? What are the pros and cons of going with one approach versus another? And so, I mean, I think the illustrative point here is we're in a usage-based economy today. It's only going to accelerate as we become more AI-driven. And I'm just really proud of my little robot stick figure there. So let's take a moment to appreciate. And so, but, you know, to illustrate this though, like I'm based in Chicago, and I recently had the opportunity to go to Chile, Patagonia, like the furthest most point on the globe, basically. And I had all these questions. You know, do I know anybody who's been there? What's it going to be like? Do I need a visa? Can I use card? Do I need cash? What time do I leave? You know, all of these things, right? And it's a lot of work to go through all of these, answer all these questions in our digital kind of ecosystem today. I have mobile boarding passes and email confirmations and hotel reservations and advice and tips and tricks and all of these things happening across all of these different platforms. And it's you know, a lot of work. If we were to translate all of that work into sort of if-then statements or inputs on all the different apps that I need to suffer through, we can see how laborious this is. And so this is why the opportunity, or why sort of AI and generative AI and now AI agents with better AI underpinnings, because AI agents are nothing new. Today, I sort of can get rid of those if-then statements. Today, I sort of can make a lot of requests or commands to these generative AI tools, who will then kind of navigate across this open ecosystem and take, you know, tap into all of these discrete services and orchestrate for me the information that I need, right? It's limited actions at this point, which is you know, notable, limited reasoning, limited adaptability, limited decision-making, but its search and synthesis capabilities help a lot. So when we think about generative AI, right, it's nothing new. AI agents are nothing new. We've been leveraging large language models in our products to bring benefits to customers for a while, but now it's more accessible, and now the experience has improved. And what has that ushered in? It's ushered in a rush to incorporate generative AI into our products. So when we asked product marketers, we said, hey, are you incorporating generative AI in your products? 58%, nearly 60% of product marketing decision makers, or product management decision makers say that their organization is embedding AI functionality into their offerings. What's fascinating, though, is if we take that same data and slice it by size, so this is now the data that we saw before on the dark green bars. And now the light green bars is companies that are big, companies that have over $1 billion in annual revenue. That number shifts from 58 to 91% of product managers at large businesses say that generative AI is in their products. So this is not a nice to have, right? It is a need to have, and it's in a need to figure it out. What are we using generative AI for in our products? Well, today we're personalizing recommendations, we're delivering better data insights, we're providing some task automation, right? A good example is here is drafting an email or analyzing a document for some insights. But when we start thinking about what's happening today, what's on the cutting or bleeding edge today, we're talking about tools that are better at adapting, better at learning, and better at being autonomous, taking autonomous action. Now, I want to be cautious here because there is a lot of agent washing, right? Agentic and AI agents who can take actions. It's not as common as the headlines might make us think, right? There's a lot of sort of traditional process automation tools, predictive analytics systems, sort of other standalone LLMs, and what my smarter colleagues call RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation Systems. But all of these sort of underpinning technologies that are helping these agents seem more action-oriented, but maybe aren't as adaptive, aren't as learning, and aren't as autonomous as the true powers of agentic lead us, or are the true powers that they are. So when we think about as that evolves, right, when sort of more action-oriented AI agents who use the kind of better experiences and all of the advancements that we see today to evolve into agentic capabilities, we're going to see tools that will make plans, will reason through complex scenarios, will collaborate with other agents on our behalf, will leverage external tools in a more open ecosystem to achieve goals and do it with remarkable autonomy. And so, from today, we might have agents answering a question by searching a knowledge base or summarizing kind of relevant information. What we will have tomorrow in an agentic scenario is an agent who can manage a supply chain, who can adjust inventory, who can adjust pricing, who can coordinate suppliers, right? And so when we think about the possibilities for our products and evolving our current generative AI enabled products into an agentic world, it necessitates a reevaluation of our monetization strategies, because they're driving more autonomous activities. It's not necessarily associated with a human or even really direct consumption of a product or service, right? Because, you think about if AI can handle a ticket resolution, then you need fewer agents, and maybe you don't need to monetize based on the per seat, right? And so we see this evolution of subscriptions. Certainly, we've been hearing and talking about subscriptions for ages, and certainly there was fervor in the last 10 years or so, to more usage and consumption, which has been more I think in the last 2 or 3 years has certainly been a topic, because generative AI, as it synthesizes information, sort of a per conversation or per API call kind of route, has been our common kind of monetization strategy. But as we move into kind of more agentic AI scenarios, we're starting to hear a lot more about outcomes. And outcomes is not a new concept either, right? The services industry has been experimenting with this for ages, like the consultancies and the big GSIs. But the newest AI native, if you want to call them, tools come out the gate pricing on usage and or outcomes, right? Ticket resolution as an outcome, for example, or something like that. And the idea is because we're not necessarily paying for new features or new releases, and we don't necessarily need to pay for an arbitrary kind of measurement of usage when the agent is doing the thing, right? The value is me actually doing less or being able to redirect my attentions to more value-added activities. Now we're actually paying for the work that the agent is accomplishing, or the tasks that they're accomplishing, the actions that they seek, or that they take, that are tied to the outcomes we want. We'll get, and so this is really common, right? I think a case study, a really wonderful case study of this, of course, is the pioneer of a seat-based model, Salesforce. So they have evolved their software from, they've gradually sort of inched closer to an outcome-based model as their tools have become more AI-driven and capable of more autonomous action. So you'll have, them move from seats to, in the generative AI world, they were doing sort of $2 per conversation, kind of this usage-based model. And now it's evolved into this more, hey, I'm taking action on your behalf, and so I'm going to monetize each action. They're positioning it subtly as an outcome-based model. It's really a prepaid usage-based wallet system in which they have, and this is a little rate table that I've built here on the left. You can see to illustrate it, but it's, each action, like, updating a customer record, as they use examples here, executing a workflow, resolving a case, all of those actions are assigned a credit value, and that value is decremented from a prepaid pack of credits that you have bought from Salesforce. And in fact, in this case, it's a relatively simple rate table, as I understand it. It is each action, all actions cost 20 credits, and they align with a flat 10-cent cost. And it, it decrements from there. But actually, the technology enables us to do much more sophisticated rate tables than this, as some of you well know. But what does this, so this transformation that we're talking about, when we get to this per action monetization strategy, this more usage and consumption, which may have, maybe usage and consumption masquerading as outcomes, right? Because the action itself is not an outcome, but what does that do to our technology stack, our monetization stack? And the technology that actually supports this is varied. So before we get to that technology, I wanted to walk through, maybe sort of conceptually walk through the basics here. Think about the processes that need to happen in order to record a usage event and follow it on with a monetization activity. So that's what we're going to do here for a moment. So first, a customer or their agent accumulates usage by engaging with your product or service, right? So there's a bunch of usage events that get accumulated. Then, and interestingly and importantly, I think especially today, given the context of our conversation, is that it's usage that you have granted. It's usage that they are entitled to, and is enforced in hopefully as close to real time as possible. That is allowed or disallowed or managed. That access and entitlement is managed in line with the usage activity and the customer activity in the product, right? And so that's an important layer here. Following that, we actually have a number of systems that are, you've got this raw data now, these usage events that you have to clean, you have to make it readable, you have to route it, you have to compute it, and you have to kind of take action on it. And this is where things get muddy, because this is a lot of different systems underneath. We'll talk about it in a second, that kind of have varying event libraries that host, specific triggers that we need to look out for, with a listening engine that listens for those events, and an action engine that sort of then automates a process or a workflow, executes a workflow based on that event that has happened and in the context of the use case, right? So it's all of this has to happen to keep the wheels turning so that usage event can be that raw data usage can be usable, and that it can work through the rest of the process to be monetized accurately and appropriately recorded. Which brings me to this next point, that the rate table, the system of record for how you rate, what those unit of measurements equate to in value in this particular context for this customer, is actually something that's a little bit it's a little bit of a land grab at the moment. It doesn't have to live as deeply in, it doesn't have to live on your desktop in an Excel table, that's for sure. It doesn't have to live in a billing tool necessarily either. It's this table, this really important computational element that ties the usage events to the rest of the processes that happen. And what are those processes? Well, they're myriad, right? There's it's sort of the rest of the monetization stack. It's billing, it's payments, it's tax, it's revenue recognition, and it enables them to do their jobs properly. Now, this isn't a linear thing, right? Customer contracts and terms, orders, usage events, usage records, invoices, payments, revenue records. They're much more living and breathing entities in a world of usage and consumption where, it's dynamic. Is a usage threshold reached? Has it been reached? How close to it are we? What does that mean for the rest of this process? Are there overages? Did an upgrade event happen? All of these systems are increasingly sort of decoupled, but dependent, so that they can dynamically change in line with the customer context and with these usage events, right? Now, when we think about the actual technology stack that enables that process, which solutions do these things? Which is responsible for what? Which is best suited to each of these tasks? It actually really depends. It's an unsatisfactory answer, but it really depends on your business, on your company culture, on your IT culture, on your sort of business problems and the champions who are tasked with solving them. So we're going to go through this and try to keep this in mind as we talk through all the different solutions that might pick up the roles that I just talked about as I talked through the anatomy of that usage event. It all really starts with the customer data. We know this, right? In the age of the customer that we're all in, unsurprisingly, customer data lives in a lot of systems. But as I was sort of saying, in a usage monetization model, it has to be more dynamic. It has to be increasingly real time. And there are a lot of systems that must plug into the customer data master, wherever that might live, whether it be a homegrown customer data master, whether it be a CRM. Many use CRMs for this, right? These CRMs help marketers and sales reps and customer service professionals kind of engage with and monitor and understand customers during all phases of their journeys. The problem is that it's hard to either aggregate all of that customer data centrally in the CRM. Sometimes they're not up to date. They're famously behemoth. They can be overly customized. It's impossible to get relevant data in or out of it. It may be, missing and unable to extend as downstream as you might like in billing and entitlements, and it maybe it holds entitlements, but it can't enforce them. There's a lot of sort of overlap, but when you get under that first layer of detail, some bits and pieces may be missing. And this is where you see other systems that are perhaps less purpose-built for customer analytics. I mean, CDPs purpose-built for customer analytics, and they're used to assemble better, more actionable customer profiles. They're able to sort of orchestrate customer interactions, deliver data to analytics and engagement tools and other pieces. So CDPs play a big role, sometimes complementing the CRM for its purpose. But there are other systems too, less purpose-built for customer analytics from the ground up, but have evolved for exposing the critical customer data that they have to their users, right? billing and entitlements, two critical ones. So they have varying levels of sort of valuable customer data about the state of a customer account, what has been paid for, what's upcoming and about to be paid, or what piece of the product have they used, where have they, how much of it have they used, right? It's the entitlements is so integrated into the product experience that there's critical data there too. So all of these systems and where your sort of master customer data lives is probably, it's important, but is probably complemented by customer data systems living around it. That's natural, and that's the state of the world. When we start to think about product data, similarly, it's duplicated in many systems, and sometimes to a disservice of our customer experiences. But as sort of product-led growth and more, let's say, self-service enablement and even like low or no code integrations across product ecosystems, there's product attribute management and bundling and kind of product experience orchestration that push the bounds of what a traditional product catalog owns. And so you need these technologies to be more usage friendly. Because if your product monetization strategy become increasingly aligned in an AI world where your product value and the value it delivers and the actions it takes are monetized dynamically and autonomously, these things have to be working in synergy. And so you don't want to have a product catalog that makes you manage for all of your different bundles an insane amount of SKUs, right? It's about flexible bundling, flexible pricing, discounting, and sort of guided selling rules that really enable the product attributes to be coupled and modified in a way for that selling motion and that customer's context. So you need a billing system, and sometimes, the ERP, for example, may be the golden record of product, but it isn't dynamic enough and isn't close enough to the front office to match with the kind of bundling and rebundling and upgrades and downgrades, that a usage-based model requires. And so we often see these complemented in different ways. In a more B2B or negotiated sales motion, the billing system often plays a heavy role in kind of managing the products and their attributes and their bundles. In a much more self-service motion, we see the commerce platforms playing a big role in doing so. But both of these systems, or regardless of where you own the product, these solutions are increasingly evolving with the market to be more usage friendly, but it is certainly a place to kick the tires in terms of who and how and where your product system of record should be. I think where things get really interesting and a little bit more dynamic too is when our product experiences and monetization strategies do become more dynamic in a usage world, so too do the apps that support those experiences. That, in order for that whole middle and back office to work to support that more dynamic front office experience and that customer journey that you want to deliver in a usage-based model, or in a model in which agents are kind of talking to each other, which may be two different kinds of interaction modes that need to be designed for, we have to think about that product experience and that customer journey much more, we have to tie it much more closely to the billing processes, the revenue recognition processes, and the entitlements and provisioning and the enforcement of that product in a world in which usage and consumption happens in real time, right? So how do we think about how the customer journey, what they're using right now, how much of it, how close to that next tier are they? How does that change billing, promotion, rev rec? How does it change the rate we are charging them for that usage? what new products do we unlock for them? How do we enable all of these systems to be working to support that product experience? So these tools, the commerce platform, the product, the entitlements and provisioning tools, any other kind of customer-facing interfaces or interaction modes, which may be below the glass, right, which may not actually be any HTML, all of that needs to be, this is that sort of messy middle, the beginning of the messy middle that we talk about. It needs to be really designed with and considered of the processes the back office processes that need to happen in order to recognize revenue and report profit and report revenue. So this is where the disconnect kind of happens, is there's a lot of creative opportunities in this front office. They have to evolve in line. We can support really creative product experiences, but if we can't monetize them, if we can't tie those to, appropriate rate and proration, and then further down the stream to separate those events into billing moments, payment actions, and revenue recognition records, we will fail to grow. We will fail to deliver on the experience that we are looking for. And so there's an interesting question here. And this is where I want to tap Michael too, because we see software companies that say we're more likely than others to, and it's true, our data proves this, right, that software companies are more likely than others to launch new products experiences through new channels, new distribution modes, new and creative sort of bundling, and with third parties and partners. But they are also simultaneously more likely to be to like the status quo, prioritize status quo, prioritize stability, and prioritize compliance, minimizing risk. There's much more risk aversion at the same time in a software company. And so I think that there's, we did a study together. Revenera commissioned Forrester to study the benefit of kind of bringing an entitlements and provisioning and enforcement tool that is in line with a usage and consumption model and subscription models therein as well, that is and can enable better control of that front office experience. And there was incredible results that I think paint a really wonderful picture for how you can chase both of those things at the same time. You can chase new product experiences and comply with back office requirements and mitigate risk. They reinforce each other when you've got better control of that product experience and you've got creative and flexible monetization strategies supporting them. Michael, is there anything you wanted to add there maybe about the study or?
Well, I'll get to the study at the end, but you raised some interesting points, because there is this tension, right, between the desire for software suppliers to offer these AI functionalities and products that customers want, but aligning the price with the value is always the tricky equation, because AI definitely costs a lot more to put out there than your standard feature that once you bake it, it's baked, and you can do it a subscription fairly easily. There are variable costs, and you want to make sure that offering AI is going to eat your lunch as a software supplier. So you talked earlier about that relatively simple rate table for Salesforce, where all the different items were the same cost. They've figured out for now where price aligns with value, but for other software suppliers, they haven't figured that out, and they want a more dynamic rate table where they can go in and experiment and feed that usage data back into their system and understand there's a lot of value being derived here. We understand what the costs are. Let's tweak that rate table. And obviously, Revenera offers dynamic monetization with elastic access, and it obviously sits in the entitlement management system, and it's easy to do that. But I think right now it's really important to sort of confront that tension between price and value, and make sure that you are able to give customers what they want without having it really eat up a lot of your revenues.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I think one of the things that comes up a lot is we think about going from usage to outcomes is how do you there's some thought leadership out there already about this, like how do you attribute, how do you define an outcome, how do you track an outcome in a solution, in a software, in an automated way, and if it's a binary, great, that helps, right? It did this thing, it did not do this thing, but that's more sort of even action oriented, right? Like what action did it take rather than the outcome that you might have. Like outcomes are always a little bit squishier, and how do you attribute your solution to that outcome definitively? And I think that the closest way we can get to that is by tracking usage. It is by getting better and closer to the actual usage of the product or service to the extent that you can, in order to collect and truly, I mean, this takes us to the next point here, which is to take that raw usage data, clean it, make it readable, route it, compute it, drive insights from it, and make it usable for the rest of this stack. And I think that this, we talked about this. I remember saying this back when IoT the first came into focus, which is with an IoT scenario, usage and consumption is the monetization strategy of IoT, whether it is on the surface or not, whether the consumers are paying per use or not, because what you're doing is in IoT scenarios, you're tracking how they're using this product and then figuring out what you can monetize therein, right? The opportunity is dynamic monetization. It is about seeing and taking the insights and learning from how your customers are actually using your product and service, and then building a strategy around it. And so you need systems that can ingest, the usage data, and this can be depending on the data complexity, right? It might be a data mediation, which is the sort of a telco terminology solution. It might be, you might hear it called usage data transformation. It might be sort of usage infrastructure. There's certainly usage data specialists cropping up a lot now. There's certainly usage rating and discounting, which are enforced or supported by a number of systems. But all of these, again, much like that sort of front office dynamism that we need, the kind of infrastructure that we need to be able to take that usage data and transform it and treat it in a way that is readable, either by AI tools or by BI tools, and then or by other tools, our billing systems, our entitlements and provisioning systems we need that data because it becomes a better source of truth for our opportunities moving forward.
Yep. And I know, as we've talked about before, different stakeholders, different personas, different roles, and different organizations have different needs, right? Billing folks have different needs and different goals than product folks and operations folks. So it is interesting. You were talking about the ability to make sure that a lot of this rate table stuff, for example, is happening close to real time. So you do get that, real-time connection between product usage and entitlements, and then ultimately billing. But it is interesting to know that all of this data has got to come together somewhere. And I know a lot of our customers are putting it into data lakes and sort of working on it there, because a lot of these systems do a really good job of providing very role-centric, role-critical information, but ultimately you do need to bring it up and then take a bigger, broader take on it and really understand how all those parts play amongst each other.
Right. Yeah. And I think that this is where we start to talk about like the current state, the near future state, and the ideal state. Because of course, in an ideal state, we have systems that are all, the data object is the data object is the data object, and automation there's no integration burden, and all of the systems are ingesting and using and working from the same single source of truth. But the reality of our technology stacks is so much more complicated than that today. And so when we think about when we think about, for example, where that rate table should live, it has a lot to do with who's in charge and who has the power to make a change today. And we'll talk more about that too. So you'll have, there's a lot of folks whose rating logic lives in an Excel spreadsheet today. That's not uncommon. But there are a number of other systems that can support rating and more sophisticated rating, or simplify the operations around rating, aka, making it more, perhaps less temperamental than an Excel spreadsheet. And it can be in any number of ways. And there's certainly trade-offs for each approach. But this is an area in which, okay, if we're thinking about evolving our monetization strategy, and maybe I don't sit on billing ops, maybe I'm a product manager, I have much more control, initiative, subject matter expertise, domain expertise in the entitlements and provisioning world. And if we're making this move and we don't have, or we're in the process of having cross-functional alignment, and we're working on building a unified technology stack or a better data lake, data management practice, maybe the next step that we take, the next best step that we take is about, and this is a point I'll make in a moment too, is about where you live and where you are. And a rate table, there are pros and cons to each of these approaches. It is not necessarily in anyone's best interest to wait 16 months until you've re-platformed your ERP to start playing with a usage or experimenting with a usage and consumption model. So how do we take the realities of our tech stack today and evolve into it? And this, by the way, there's any number of other kind of, I mentioned this messy middle before. We have, after this has been rated, there's any number of other business processes that have to happen. I mean, your messy middle, how you might define with the other solutions that connect these front office experiences to a back office experience will be your own. There's affiliate management and partner management. There's contract life cycles. There's potentially, CPQ tools, certainly taxation tools, and other bits and pieces that make up, the tools that certainly could enforce the compliance of the ERP in the back office, accounting standards and the like, but enable a bit more of that front office creativity and dynamism that we need. Those tools are myriad. Each of these need to be put under a microscope in your use cases for their usage friendliness, and they should. But again, you have to start somewhere, and where should that place be? So we'll start to get to these kind of recommendations here, which is you have to give yourself permission to start your usage monetization tech evolution and monetization strategy today, or if you've already started it, to push it forward and build momentum on it, given the momentum of AI and the oncoming tidal wave of agentic capabilities. I think it's really important to prioritize, right? And to be pragmatic. The headlines may make you think we're way further advanced than we are. So create a roadmap tailored to your role, the state of your organization's cross-functional alignment, which may be in progress, as it has been for probably more than a decade. Map your business problems on this roadmap in a sort of the size and impact or urgency of this business problem, and the feasibility of solving it based on the other components, based on everything else, your role, your organization's cross-functional alignment. So it's really important to kind of start somewhere, and to examine where you are today, including your technology stack. So one of the things that we always talk about is it doesn't really always have to be new tech. Your existing partners are certainly evolving their solutions to be more usage friendly, sometimes more than others. But I think that there's a really important step in kind of existing the tech investments that you have for supporting features for solving those business problems today. Determine what to buy based on that roadmap and based on what you have the most influence and the responsibility for in your tech stack, because there are many roads to Rome here. Then after you've kind of decided and taken stock and audited your existing capabilities and where those gaps are, and you have a sense of your where you need to stop the bleeding and how you can do that, now it's time to sort of strategize, right? Predictability is harder than ever. And Michael's point that he made earlier about the cost of AI is an important one, and it is less predictable because it's based on usage, and the cost kind of question is also up in the air. We haven't figured out exactly how what the cost of delivery actually really is and how it's evolving. We think it's going to go down, and it has been going down, but we're not entirely sure how it's going to, how the time scale is going to kind of manifest. So think about focusing again, in order to manage this unpredictability and volatility, to align to your customer needs and their outcomes. This is a good practice that you should already have been doing, but it's now better late than never. And it becomes more important as we start getting to usage and consumption, and thereafter actions, monetizing based on actions, monetizing based on work done, monetizing based on outcomes. You have to build a really robust practice about understanding customer needs and the kind of value your product and services deliver, which will evolve over time. So this is an ongoing practice. But it's important to think about your monetization strategy as close to those needs and those outcomes as possible. And as we mentioned, don't forget about cost to deliver. It's something to keep an eye on, but it's not a hard science yet. And then as you think about exerting your influence and filling those technical gaps, I think we have to start thinking about building, to that point that we were talking about earlier, Michael, like building that better infrastructure for managing usage data across the stack, right? So as we think about using our usage data as fuel for profitability, for product investment, for customer research, customer care, all of these things, we start to have to think about our data lakes and our systems for collecting and enforcing customer experiences and back office processes based on usage events and triggers. And so that's really important. And that's sort of, in this moment in time, you've got some legacy tools that do this, who can handle incredible scale. And you've got some newer kids on the block here who are doing this with the best in application development. And then, of course, I think it's really important to give yourself permission to make changes and prepare for those changes. So I think that right now, we sort of said this in the age of subscriptions, like a subscription is a monetization model of change. Why? Because you are monetizing based, or you're hinging, you're sort of anchoring your renewal on the actual value that you delivered over the course of the subscription, rather than a future promise of what you can deliver, which was the old sales motion. Now, as we think about usage, it isn't predictable, right? We don't really know. We can try to create models to predict usage, but sometimes that requires tenure, requires doing usage for a while. But it also means, in a world in which our products and services are changing. I remember delivering a future of payments and future of digital experiences conversation 3 years ago, where I talked about the generative AI capabilities, or the sort of more AI agent with better Gen AI capabilities, as something being in the far future, as agentic being, in the far future. Fast forward 3 years, and we're looking around the corner at this. So the monetization changes are going to happen in line with our product changes, which are going to see over the course of the next few years an insane amount of iteration and change. So prepare for that. I would say that it's probably a good best practice, especially if you're not a new player, a new software seller. If you're an established software seller, to consider maintaining some tried and true models, and consider hybrid approaches, right? Really look at your product stack and, again, the value that those products deliver to determine where subscriptions still make sense and where sort of usage based on seats still makes sense, or per conversation still makes sense, and where more flexible or action-based sort of monetization strategies make sense. And it's okay to have an imperfect fit. It's not, we're in this stage where maybe a per seat model, like if you think about it today, a per seat model doesn't always, like, more people using a billing solution, let's throw one out there, doesn't necessarily make the billing solution more usable or better. It's not really anchored to the usage or the value that the billing solution enables, right? This is why most billing systems are monetizing based on revenue lift, or like API call, maybe subscribers, whatever, there's this usage component to it. But our monetization strategies can be imperfect, but they must be changeable, and they must be prepared to be informed by usage and by our customer needs. So that's what I mean there by continuing to iterate. So with all of this, your tech, you've kind of walked through the anatomy of a usage event, all the different kind of computing that needs to happen and connections that need to happen between that front office product experience and the back office recording of, implications of that usage event. And then we've talked about the myriad systems that are all evolving to support this better, which gives us the result of start where you use the human element of this to inform your strategy. Where do you have power and influence and responsibility for tech selection and for strategy setting that can best instrument your organization for this usage-based model, or for the evolution of this usage-based model towards a more outcome-based model?
Yeah, those are great points, Lily. Especially this notion of supporting hybrid monetization models, and being able to iterate as you go along and as you grow and as you understand what that usage data looks like. And you mentioned it before. We did work with Forrester earlier this year and put out their total economic impact study, where over a 3-year period, Forrester found that this composite organization that they built based upon interviews with 4 customers yielded a 426% ROI from a software monetization perspective. I'll go through this quickly, but the things I think that are relevant to our discussion today is, payback period of less than 6 months. That's always great, but 90% reduction time to bring out new models, and when we talk about software monetization, we're talking about entitlement management, monetization services like the dynamic monetization with elastic access to implement sort of this token-based approach to monetizing AI. And then, of course, when we talk about the quote-to-cash process, unquantified benefits to have streamlined global compliance, improved customer experience, just that integration across the quote-to-cash system, that really allows you to enforce those entitlements, get data back, feed it into all the different quote-to-cash systems. And then very quickly, I'm not going to read these quotes to you, but there are some really good quotes here from customers. And I would encourage folks to go to the Docs tab, download the report. We have it for you for download. We also have a recording that Lily did with her colleague Zara at our Soft Summit event not too long ago, where we go through this in a lot more detail. But scalability and performance, and then customer insights, critical to really understanding where is the price, where is the value, how do you merge those two, and really understanding usage, not only to make that revenue more predictable, but also to understand trends that you're seeing in usage. But
yeah,
we've gone a little bit over, but any last thoughts, Lily?
Yeah, one last thought, which is I think in that sort of, the beautiful results of the study, bringing together the sort of quantified benefits and the unquantified benefits, that to go back to what I was saying earlier, that enable that kind of, not only that increased sort of go-to-market speed and reduce payback time and reducing revenue leakage and things like this, but there's also that piece of maintaining or streamlining compliance, sort of better control, better visibility, better all of that kind of serving the software sellers' need to experiment, to launch new things, to get out there, to know what to launch based on better visibility, and then also maintain and be compliant, and mitigate that risk all at once. I think that was one of the more beautiful things. I mean, the numbers are impressive, but also one of the really beautiful things that came out of the study was that these two things don't come at a cost to one another.
Right. And just the ability to implement new models quickly and, as a configuration, as opposed to having to rebuild things and systems from scratch is always a big plus. But Lily, thank you so much for joining us. It is always a fun session with you, and you bring so much experience and insights to the table. So thank you for being here. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us today. Please be sure to reach out after the webinar if you have any follow-up questions. And don't forget to download any of the resources you're interested in from the Docs tab. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody and wish you all a great day. Take care.
Thank you.